Season 4 Reloaded shook up a lot. Like, while some of the dominant weapons are still there in their place, sure, there's a lot of weapons that have popped up into the discussion as either viable, competitive, or even top tier. Either again in some cases, or for the very first time in others. Today, we're running down the top 10 weapons, or top 10 plus weapons and loadouts you should be using after this update for Season 4 Reloaded to give you the best competitive edge in Warzone going forward. As we go along, drop your thoughts down below. Any weapons you're thinking of here that are top 10 caliber that maybe we don't talk about in this video, anything you're particularly fond of, whatever the case, drop your thoughts below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, do be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Warzone, Modern Warfare 2, and anything Call of Duty related. And finally, do be sure to check out my friends over at GamerAdvantage for the best blue light glasses on the market, but more on them in just a bit. For now though, let's talk about the weapons and the weapon tuning that ended up happening. With the Season 4 Reloaded update, we had two waves of weapon tuning, some with the update itself, and then a bit more to follow with snipers later on as of yesterday. But for the most part, one of the big things, one of the big points of attack for weapon tuning that Raven tried to tackle was that of the rifle category. Yes, some of the meta rifles definitely still persist, absolutely, but I will say there's quite a bit more versatility to this category now. The way that I found myself describing it to a lot of the people that I play with regularly was that it felt like it was more watered down than anything else, where you had previously like this solid pillar of weapons you could use, that being the NZ41, the bar, and a couple of others, but now you have a handful of weapons in the rifle category that absolutely can get the job done. On top of that, additional adjustments were made to some close range weapons. Shotgun metas are kind of back as well. One of the final weapons we'll also talk about in this video is pretty surprising to you because I don't think that I would have ever imagined myself putting it in a top 10 or I guess top 15 or top 20 weapon video for it, but it speaks for itself. Let's start out with the weapon builds though, bearing in mind that these aren't necessarily any 1 to 10 or 1 to 15, 1 to 20 specific. We're probably going to group them out via weapon classification, but with so many here up on deck, we're just going to breeze through weapon builds here for it. So let's start out with one that unfortunately didn't quite die or anything like that. It's still absolutely a meta weapon. The NZ41 had some recoil added to it, but I mean, when you change something on a scale of 100, something that has 0, and you just make it a value of like 1.25 or something, it's still ridiculously easy to control. So for that, you're still going to end up having the same build, the MX Silencer, Orb Weaver 360mm barrel, 2.5 times optic, Orb Weaver E-Pack, hand stop, Sakura 50 round magazine, lengthened, hatch grip, frenzy, and fully loaded that I'd recommend before. So not really a whole ton change with that, but it might not be the only weapon you want to use. It's not the dominant head and shoulders above everything else as it used to be. It's good, but it isn't the only weapon you can consider. Outside of that, one that I would seriously recommend and that I've had a blast with is the Nikita AVT. Now, this is a bit more faster firing than some other rifles, but it can absolutely handle itself if you know how to control the weapon. For this, I'd recommend the MX Silencer, Empress 613mm barrel, the 2.5 times optic, the Empress notch stock, the hand stop, the Sakura 60 round magazine, lengthened, the hatch grip, as well as fleet and fully loaded. Perk 1, there's really not a whole ton. You can add Perfectionist here if you'd like a little bit more control, but if you feel confident in your ability to control the recoil, I end up liking to have that additional movement speed and weapon swap quickness. The third rifle up on deck is one that honestly was a lot of fun to play around with before this update, but has actually been pretty solid since then, is the KGM40. This one, again, we've talked about before. I'd recommend the MX Silencer, Reisdorf 722mm shrouded barrel, the 2.5 times optic, the Krosnick 12V stock, the hand stop, the Klauser 60 round magazines, lengthened as your ammunition, the polymer grip, tight grip, and fully loaded. Those three to me are probably my top 3 Vanguard rifles, but as we'll talk about, there of course are still plenty that absolutely work. Just like two modern warfare weapons that make their way back into the fold now at this point. It's been a long time since we've talked about the modern warfare weaponry, and especially second weapon up on deck of that category we'll talk about. But firstly, let's talk about one that has been seen before, and not recently, but more recently than the other, the CR56 AMAX. The CR56 AMAX absolutely has a place at the table once again, and for that, I'd recommend the mono suppressor, the Zodiac barrel, the 3 times optic, the Commando foregrip, and the 45 round magazine. Unfortunately, with a lot of these now 5 attachment builds, you might recognize that they do become monotonous across Modern Warfare and Cold War, so you absolutely may be able to guess some of these builds, but the CR56 AMAX, baby, give it a try. It is back, or can be back. Viable, competitive. I'm just excited I can use it again. Then one that everybody's been talking about and honestly is very hit or miss for me personally, very easy to control, definitely still a lot of fun to play around with, is the Kilo 141. Now, honestly, this one has been out of the meta for a long time, but it did get adjusted in the patch notes and actually didn't quite restore it to the former glory of the Modern Warfare days, but definitely made it something that catches your eye. It is competitive now at this point, which is nice. For this, I'd recommend the Mono Suppressor, the SynGuard Arms Prowler Barrel, the 3x Optic, the Commando foregrip, and the 60-round magazine, as we would have beforehand. Now, the M13 is one that I don't quite know if I'd classify as one of our top rifles right now. I don't know if I'm just a hater for the M13, man, but statistically speaking, it's only good if you end up having that neck or headshot damage, which if you are a top tier player, you can hit those accurate shots there. Absolutely give it a try. You will do well with it, but if you're somebody that hits like lower chest, stomach, extremities, it's not going to do as well as you may hope for it. So that said, the final weapon that I'd classify as competitive or meta perhaps is the Cooper Carbine, one that does make its way back into the fold we haven't talked about for quite some time, but with the adjustments to the other rifles, this kind of knocked it back into the meta here and viable options. The only thing that was changed here with this was that the 60-round magazine got more horizontal recoil added to it, but realistically, it's not all that bad. For this, I'd recommend the MX Silencer, Cooper Custom Barrel, the 2.5x Optic, or the 3 to 6x Optic, depending on your preference, the Cooper 45 RS Stock, or the Ragdoll Skeletal if you want to end up changing that to prioritize movement speed and sprint to fire speed, as opposed to a bit more control, the Hand Stop, the 60-round magazine lengthened, polymer grip, hard scope, and fully loaded. Now, things like the STG, the bar, absolutely still viable, so you can try those out as well. But moving on over into the next category of play, let's talk about some SMGs. Firstly, the H4 Blixen still absolutely is a top tier weapon, maybe even the most dominant still in the SMG category. So that's just something that, while it is kind of annoying to continuously talk about this, it is still worth noting. For this, I'd recommend personally the recoil booster. I've kind of liked the 17-inch barrel as of lately, but then I'd end up running the slate reflector, remove stock, hand stop, 54-round magazine, lengthened, taped grip, fleet, and quick. Yes, Raven did take a punch at this and tried to knock it out quite a bit, but it still lives on. It is something that's still very good and easy to use, so if you guys like SMG play, I'd recommend this. Next, one that's kind of popped back into the meta because it is a weapon that was pretty solid, but other SMGs just kind of outclassed it with adjustments to those other ones. The Type 100 is back in the limelight. For this, I'd recommend the recoil booster, the light barrel, or the rapid barrel. That one comes down to a bit more preference if you want to sacrifice a little bit in terms of that damage range for a bit more snappy nature to it, or if you want to trade that fire rate for a little bit more damage and accuracy, but also getting damage range. Comes down to which one you prefer. The slate reflector, the skeletal, or folding stock, again, comes down to preference on that one. I still personally like the hand stop, though I've been playing around a bit with the skeletal stock as well for it. But then after this, one of the big things with the Type 100 that has been a primary focus is the Russian short 36-round magazine, offering more damage range, bullet penetration, and bullet velocity for sacrifices in recoil control, movement speed, ADS speed, and fire rate. So you make it a little bit more powerful with that magazine chosen, but then after that, I'd recommend lengthened, the hatch grip, acrobatic, and quick. Outside of that, I'd still say the Armor Guerra ends up having a place in the meta here with this. For that, I'd recommend the recoil booster, the body precision barrel, the slate reflector, and or any iron sight. Personally, I still like the iron sights on the Armor Guerra, but that's just my own personal preference. Slate reflector, cannot go wrong with it. Then I'd end up putting the skeletal stock on top of that, the skeletal under barrel, the 60-round magazine lengthened, the tape grip for a bit more sprint to fire speed, weapon swap quickness, movement speed, and aiming stability, as well as hard scope and quick. Outside of that, I'd still say the Marco is viable. I don't know if I'd put it up there as one of my top, but if we're talking SMGs, I'd still say the Marco does have a little bit of a place here with it, where that's the same build as we've talked about before. Recoil booster, body 240mm barrel, slate reflector, Perfetto Asada stock, hand stop, 64-round magazine, lengthened, taped grip, gung-ho, and quick. Then, honestly, one that is genuinely viable and is going to round out our SMG play here at this is one that I've had a lot of fun with recently, but it actually got a buff, which is always fun. That being the Cold War MP5. The big downfall here of this weapon was the damage range. The max damage range was really small. They extended it by 2 to 3 meters, which still doesn't do a whole ton for the overall, overpowered stature of this weapon, but it makes it way more usable in a ton more engagements. For this, I'd recommend the Agency Suppressor, Tiger Team Spotlight, Bruiser Grip, the 50-round drum mag, and the Serpent Wrap. Some people will toss on a Raider stock or something in place of that rear grip, which is totally fine. That's just my personal preference. But that said, that rounds out our SMGs. And before we go over into the sort of shotgun and secondary and sniper metas, a quick reminder, check out my friends over at GamerAdvantage. I've been talking about them for a year and a half at this point, and I still will swear by them. If you're working at a PC or computer, looking at a screen for any kind of prolonged period of time of day, you may already know the effects of blue light. I've had trouble combating it for years because honestly, honestly, the life of a YouTuber is basically just looking at your computer screen for 10 hours a day. But GamerAdvantage is absolutely my advantage. Head and shoulders better than any generic pair you'll find on Amazon. They're comfortable, durable, and lightweight frames make them a great choice for all-day use, and they're clinically proven. So if you guys would like to check out the science, learn a bit more about them, link in the description below will take you over to their website, and if you want to pick something up, use code ESPRESSO at checkout for 10% off your entire order. But that said, rounding out this video, I want to talk about some weapons that actually might be surprising to you. Firstly, of course, we have the shotgun meta, actually kind of healthy. All shotguns essentially got some buffs here to it, so honestly, two of the ones that I would say reign supreme right now, the Gallo, VLK Rogue, among a couple others. Personally, I don't have the VLK Rogue set up. It was terrible within Modern Warfare 2019, if I'm honest with you, so don't have a build here for that one, but the Gallo that I would recommend is the Agency Choke, Ranger Barrel, Tiger Team Spotlight, No Stock, and the 9-round tube magazine. So if you guys want to rock something a little bit different here as a secondary, or if you're close quarters, it's not a bad weapon to use by any means. The next weapon might sound crazy, but hear me out. It'll let you get your sort of restock, your tempered, ghost even, high alert, whatever you want to take in place of overkill as your secondary perk. This will allow you to do just that because the 50 GS or Desert Eagle actually isn't half bad within Warzone this season. It ended up getting a buff here as the mid-season update, bringing its damage up to 91 for that max damage, which means that it does have the potential with headshots to 3-shot, but realistically, it's still pretty solid in one-on-one and one-on-two engagements. Might sound crazy, but just give it a try. You're either gonna hate it or you're gonna love it. It probably falls in that camp, but it was surprisingly good after the update when I was playing around with it. And the final thing we'll talk about is the sniper of the 3-line rifle. That just kind of being what I would say is the best sniper at the moment. That and probably the ZRG, but I just found the 3-line to be a bit more like quick scoping oriented while still holding that one-shot damage potential. So that said, I'd recommend the Mercury Silencer, Empress 514mm barrel, the Zach Custom MZ on that, the pistol grip, the 5-round fast mag, the lengthened ammo, leather grip, silent focus, and fully loaded. And that said, that is our top 10 to 15 to 20 weapons here that I would recommend within Warzone Season 4 Reloaded after the update. So that's what we're gonna call it. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you like any of these builds? Any that really surprise you? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone, Modern Warfare 2, and anything COD related. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Go dominate with some of these loadouts, and peace.